Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Unfound Now. I am Unfound's host, Ed Densel, and as the title suggests, I will be covering the disappearance of Wendy Gessing, who disappeared from Crest Hill, Illinois on June 12th, 2021, so about 4 months ago. She's a 50-year-old white female, and she is a mother of one son. Now, if you're just new to Unfound Now here on the Unfound Podcast Channel, I do these videos, this monthly series, for two particular reasons. One, of course, to raise awareness about a newer disappearance, something we do not do during the regular episodes, the podcast that comes out every Friday that we've been doing for about 5 years. The limit on the regular podcast is that a disappearance has to be at least a year old before we will cover it for the regular episodes. Whereas here on Unfound Now, and I've been doing this since about June or July of 2020, this gives me an opportunity to cover newer disappearances that are only 2, 3, or, as in the case with Wendy's, 4 months old. So once again, number one reason is to raise awareness of these recent disappearances. Number two, though, here at Unfound, we are all about education. As some of you know, I recently appeared at Northwestern State University in Louisiana to talk to college students about disappearances, not just to talk about cases that Unfound covers, but how to analyze them, the patterns, what do I see, different types of disappearances. And that's what I'm trying to do with Unfound Now. Because I believe the number one way that these disappearances are going to get solved is by the public becoming more educated on them. When they read articles, when they watch a YouTube video, maybe unfortunately, if they experience a disappearance themselves, a loved one, a friend, a coworker, then they can automatically start to think about, well, what does this mean? In contrast to, I think, most of the public that has a lot of misconceptions. They have a lot of misconceptions about disappearances. And I'm trying to change that with Unfound Now. Now, for Wendy's, 3 points of learning, we might call them, for her disappearance that I will be talking about later in this video. Number one, other incidents matter. Number two, we and our lives aren't as unique as we think. And number three, read quotes in articles very carefully. So now I'm going to take you to a map. I'm going to detail all of the important locations for Wendy's disappearance, and then I will come back to you to further jump into these important points. Okay, let's go through the details of Wendy Gessing's disappearance. I'm going to do this using the map so I can show you this as we go. You can see right there in the center of the screen at Pizza by Marcelloni's. This is on Rainer Avenue. In fact, Rainer Avenue does not go this way. Rainer Avenue is actually this way, north and south. Wendy left the pizza place at approximately 6:30 p.m. This is a pizza place that her boyfriend Scott Harris owned, and they had been together for many years, over a decade, Wendy and Scott. So she left at about 6:30 p.m. from here, but she was supposed to work until closing, which that day, Saturday, would have been 10 p.m. So she took off for some reason 3.5 hours early. I do not believe that she locked up. I'm taking for granted that somebody else was also working there. Maybe she did lock up. I've not seen that in any articles, but I'm taking for granted that somebody else, at least one other employee, was there when she left. Allegedly giving somebody a ride, and we'll come back to that topic later. Please remember this. So there she was at Pizzas by Marcelloni. And then Scott Harris, her boyfriend, tried contacting her later that night into the next day and could not reach her. Now, the big question I have is, did they live together? I think they did. I think my information showed that they did live together, but that also is something I want you to think about. And over the next week, though, after she went missing from this location, allegedly she left there with somebody. Her car was found to the south of the Pizzas by Marcelloni, and I'm gonna take you down to that location. It was 400 Buell Avenue, and there's something very interesting about this. It is a dead end. Buell Avenue ends in a dead end, but it's not any regular type of dead end. You'll see this dead end actually is right next to the street, but you can't get from here to there with a car. You can walk it, but I think there are posts or something there. You can't drive from here to there. So if you're coming down Buell Avenue, you actually have to turn around and go back the next way if you want to get back this way to get onto this street. Seems very, very rare to me, and I'm sure if I went all over Crest Hill, Illinois, I would find that this is very, very odd setup they have here. And this tells me that whoever dumped Wendy's car there, whether it was Wendy or somebody else, knew this. I just can't believe that that is a coincidence that this car gets dumped off in a setup, kind of a street setup that is so unique. And we'll be talking about that dead end a little bit later. Now, what is interesting, though, is to zoom this out. Her phone was eventually found in the opposite direction. Not south of the pizza place, but north of it, up here on this road called, go way up here, West Taylor Road. Somewhere along here, north, in a place called Romeoville. It wasn't even in the same city, same jurisdiction, I guess. It was up here in a place called Romeoville on this road up here. So her car is found south of the pizzeria. Her phone is well north, much farther away than the car was. And I read that the phone had been found. It had been turned into an addiction recovery place or something like that. And that's how it eventually got into law enforcement hands. So you have to think about that. And once again, in the end, I'm going to be zooming this all out so you can see the entire picture. Now, something else that is interesting to me is that Pizzas by Marcelloni is right there. Where did Scott and Wendy live? And I did check that Wendy's last address where she was living is the same place that Scott continues to live, and that is 1913 Hosmer Lane. It's right there. It's just north of the pizzeria. In fact, if you were to measure it, it's not even a quarter mile. Now, what occurs to me is, if the pizzeria was so close, was it normal for Wendy to drive to work? Drive to the pizzeria when she could have easily just walked that quarter mile? Does anybody know that? That's something that I don't know if anybody knows that, but it is strange to me. I have to think that just looking out at my building to the north or to the south, I can see for a quarter mile pretty easily. I can't imagine if I worked into some place in that view actually driving there, but it does seem that that's what Wendy did, at least on the day that she disappeared. There were search warrants handed down for a variety of places. We don't know where those places are. I've not seen any public accounts of where warrants were served. However, you should know that Wendy was not seen coming home. They had, a doorbell ringer at that home address, and she is not seen coming home that night or into the next day when Scott started to wonder where she was. And we're going to get into Scott and how he reacted to all of this. Well, there was a sighting, and that's what I'm going to take you kind of to the west. I'm not sure whether to believe this or not. I'm going to discuss that in a little bit when I start going over the 3 points that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Allegedly, the car and her were seen at this Motel 6 in Joliet, Illinois. Her car is a gray Honda CR-V, but the video was from far away, and it was at night, and we have to keep that in mind. Also, if you're wondering, where does Scott say he was, her boyfriend, where does he say he was at the time? He claims he was at the Moose Lodge over here in Picnic Grove, way over here. At the time, she went missing 6:30 in the evening, and he claims that he never saw her again. She never came home, and seemingly that's what this doorbell ringer shows at their house. So now that I've zoomed out, and I just want to show you one more thing, and just to put it out there, just something to think about. I think we do have to take a look at this, the fact that this 400 Buell Avenue, look how close it is to that river, to the Des Plaines River. Des Plaines? This is where a car was found. The river is right there, and of course you can see a bridge is right there. We've talked about it several times on Unfound, Jake LaChale, etc. That we have to think about that. When a car is found so close to a body of water, especially a body of water that has a current, and then if there is a bridge where somebody could jump. That's where a car was found. Of course, that's where the bridge is. But to zoom this out, you notice that how many different directions it seems this disappearance goes in. So once again, we have the pizza place right here, where they lived, just north of that. A little, about 2.5 miles south is where the car was found. However, it was allegedly, and Wendy and her car were allegedly seen to the west. Her phone was found to the north. And Scott, if we are to consider him a suspect, I'm not saying there's any facts to support that or to dispute that, but it's something we always have to consider. That he was way off to the east. So once again, it's like the pizza place is like right in the middle. Car here, phone there, car and Wendy allegedly seen over here, but Scott Harris is seen to the east of the location of the pizzeria. So these are all things you should think about when you're considering what could have happened to Wendy Gessing. So now let me go back to those 3 points I detailed at the beginning of this video. And we're back. Before I continue this video, I hope you will like it, subscribe to this channel, and hit that little bell button for when we upload videos such as this one, you are alerted immediately. I also urge you to check out the Facebook page on Facebook, imagine that, the discussion group, the Unfound Podcast website, theunfoundpodcast.com. You can find Unfound if you've never listened to the podcast before. You can find it on Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, Amazon, a variety of places, Podomatic. And I hope you will contribute to the program by going to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast or through PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. So let's go and take a look at those 3 points that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And if you see me looking off, it would be to my left. I guess it would be your right. I do not do this off the top of my head. But let's take a look at point number 1. Other incidents matter. I will tell you one of the first things I do when I find out about a disappearance, and it's probably going to become an episode of Unfound. I go and look and see if there are any other disappearances like it in the area, maybe to a couple years before to a couple years after. It's very important to do that. That doesn't mean if you find some disappearances that they are all related, but it might help you understand the area, the dynamics of what is going on there. I will give you an example from Unfound's history: the disappearance of Cameron Remmer, the disappearance of Jackson Miller. They disappeared within a few blocks of each other in San Francisco, within a few years of each other. And there are 3 other young men under similar circumstances who went missing, also in that same area. Like over the course of 5 years in San Francisco, 5 young men disappeared within blocks of each other. Seems like they would be related. Those disappearances will have been, might be related. We've covered 2 of those disappearances, like I've said, Cameron Remmer, Jackson Miller. Having, of course, covered those 2 and also looking into those other 3, I can tell you that all 5 surely are not related. However, you have to take a look at something like that. You always do. So with Wendy's, what do I mean when I say other incidents matter? Are there other disappearances like her in the area? No. But something that a homeowner on Buell Avenue said caught my attention. What he said is that cars get dumped on that street all the time. On Buell Avenue, maybe even to be exact, right there at the end there of that very strange dead end. So what I would like to know is, when they've looked into these other cars that have been deposited there, were they stolen? Was it a carjacking? Were any of these cars connected to a disappearance? Where were these cars last seen? The owners of them. Was it stolen out of was the car stolen out of their driveway? Was it stolen from a movie theater? Was it stolen or taken from a Walmart? Do they even know? Because I think if we had that information, we might be able to start narrowing down who left Wendy's car there. And it very well could be that one of these people who left the car there in the past also left Wendy's car there. I think it's a very important thing to do. Have the police done that? I don't know. But for all of you, these are the things that you need to think about. We also have to think about what is it that is unique about that particular street, why cars are being deposited there. And I think I showed that in the video. The way that area is set up, it's very easy to dump a car there, then walk right out onto the street. You can drive right down to the dead end of that little circle there, dump the car, walk out into the street, and nobody will know the difference. In contrast to dumping it in the middle of some suburban area on some intersection and then have to go left and right and left and right and left and right to get out to a main road. That kind of setup there with that dead end makes it very easy for someone to escape. They drive in there and then walk out. They just keep walking. So, some other disappearances where I think this is relevant that we've covered them on Unfound would be Regina Marie Boss, who disappeared from Lincoln, Nebraska over 20 years ago. I think it's worth maybe taking another look at that disappearance to see if there are any crimes around that time that maybe could be connected to Regina's disappearance. Megan Lancaster, certainly, considering that other women in the area of where she disappeared in Ohio, other women had gone missing and were murdered. And then also Sean Ginyard, that's a Canadian case from Thompson, Canada in Manitoba, that's known as being the most violent area of Canada, believe it or not. So these are the types of disappearances that Unfound has covered where I think it would be worth taking a second look at other crimes committed there. Could those other crimes be connected to these disappearances? And certainly with Wendy's, her car being left there. Can it be connected to any other cars or any people who who have left cars there. Of course, they're probably criminals, but can it all be connected? I think that's very important. Number 2, we and our lives aren't that unique. So this sighting at this Motel 6, a 50-year-old blonde woman with a Honda CR-V, I have to tell you, that has to be one of the most common combinations in the world. A lot of Honda CR-Vs out there, and I think they only come in like 4 colors or something like that. In addition, my impression, and I can say this because I'm 51 years old, it does seem that there are a lot of 50-year-old women out there who are blonde. Why? Usually they're covering up their gray hair, and I have no problem with that. But it's also the reason that there are more 50-year-old blonde women than there are 20-year-old blonde women. So you put together a lot of 50-year-old blonde women and a lot of Honda CR-Vs, there's going to be a lot of that combination out there of those types of women driving that type of vehicle. So we aren't unique as we think we are. Surely not, especially when, I drive a 2016 Hyundai Sonata, and it's white. I mean, that's one of the most common cars on American roads these days. So when we think about that video, we have to realize that. Now, of course, if it is Wendy and she was at this motel when she was supposed to be at the pizzeria, that does open up the idea of maybe drugs, prostitution. Did she get sex trafficked? Certainly possible. But hearing that the video was at night and it's far away, and I even read somewhere that the belief is that the woman seen the video was a lot younger than 50 years old, I think there are reasons to doubt this. Unless her Honda CR-V was seen there and the license plate was seen, whatever her license plate was, then I might start thinking about that. But even at that, just because her car was there doesn't mean Wendy was there. Very, very important part. And on top of everything else, as I've begun to talk about recently, about how the human mind works. This is one of the reasons flyers don't work. Why don't they work? For example, and once again, I'm looking over at my notes to my left. If I were to show you a picture of a missing person, and I told you that within the next month, you were going to pass this person somewhere, maybe on the street, at a restaurant, maybe you're going to Disney World or the beach or in an airport, you are going to pass this person. I'm telling you, you probably will miss the person. This is, once again, this is the reason flyers rarely help tracking missing persons down. Rarely. It's just not how the human mind works. So to believe that people were at this Motel 6 and they happened to see a picture of Wendy on the news and then said, oh yeah, I saw her. It's just, once again, it's just not how the human mind works. We're too caught up in our own stuff. Yes, if I were to tell you you're going to be running across a missing person within the next month, probably for the next few days, you'd be on high alert everywhere you went. But maybe 10 days in, 15 days in, 20 days in, you'd get back to your old routine. You wouldn't forget what I said, but it's hard to concentrate that long. And this is why disappearances, when they are solved, they aren't solved that way, where somebody's just walking along and happens to see somebody who he or she walked out of his or her own life. Just the odds of it are like Mega Millions or Powerball money. And I should say, some examples of sightings in unfound disappearances. These would be disappearances that we've covered on the program. For example, Renee LaManna, who went missing from Ocean City, New Jersey. Now, I will tell you, her sister believes the sightings of Renee that happened days, if not weeks or months after Renee went missing. I do not, and I don't have time to get into them here, but we keep in mind, those sightings did not help. Renee is still missing, and that's a disappearance, I think, from about 1994. Susie Lyle, the first disappearance on the first episode of Unfound. After her disappearance, her boyfriend's father was going all around saying he was seeing Susie. He was lying. Cameron Remmer. There was a guy whose picture was taken in San Francisco about a year and a half ago. Everybody insisting that this is Cameron. And he went missing back in 2011. I didn't really think it looked like the guy, but these people who did this were convinced, and they're going to track this guy down, and they're going to prove that that's Cameron. To my knowledge, that's not been done. Not been done. A year and a half later. And then Chris Turner, a very interesting situation where he went missing, and then his girlfriend and her mother claimed that they saw him. And Las Vegas Metro ended up closing the case because of the sighting. And it turned out, we now know that the girlfriend and the mother were lying because Chris's remains were found. Now, it's still an open investigation. He might have been murdered. Who knows? But his own girlfriend is a suspect was a suspect in his disappearance. And here the police go, taking her word. This is how messed up sightings can get. And that's why at Unfound, we are of the belief that any sightings after the official accepted missing persons date, now you might go by NamUs or the Charlie Project for that, any sightings after that particular date are usually wrong or just an outright lie. So when it comes to Wendy Gessing, I think there are a lot of reasons to doubt this sighting. However, if it turns out to be true, then, like I said before, we need to start being open to the idea that she did have some addiction, and that's why she was at that hotel. I mean, what's a 50-year-old woman doing at a Motel 6 when she's supposed to be at work and she's not coming home? I mean, what's going on? Was she involved in prostitution? Could she have been forced by somebody to go there? All possible. But at this point, there's no reason for me to believe these sightings. And number 3, read quotes in articles about disappearances very carefully. What you're going to learn as you take more and more of an interest in disappearances is that people are rarely quoted. Maybe the police are quoted, but it just doesn't happen a lot. But when it does, you should pay close attention because that means that is something, somebody actually said something. It is not the reporter's interpretation. In fact, I would say the reason a lot of mistakes end up being including in details of disappearances is because reporters do make mistakes. Where it's either easy to quote somebody and get the words right, in contrast to trying to write about a disappearance and getting all the details right. So, thus quotes are important. Now, going back, of course, to point number 1 that I've already talked about, this neighbor is quoted as saying, "People dump their cars here all the time." That is a quote. That is not something that was written by the reporter in shorthand. There are quotes around that statement. So somebody who lives on that street, Buell Avenue, said that. Very important. So now we go to Scott's quotes that I could find from him in articles. I'm going to read some of them. I think so, he said. There has been no activity I've seen. And he was talking about her credit cards. She didn't really have too many credit cards. She's either been taken or she's no longer with us, Scott said. I know she did not leave on her own. She usually locks up, and this is in reference to the pizza shop. I think he's under the impression that she should have been staying there till closing time, which is 10 p.m. She did not. She left at 6:30 p.m., well before closing time. And that's a quote from Scott. Scott also says, "I don't believe they think it's me. I know it's not me." And he's talking about the police. So I don't think the police think it's me. I know it's not me. And this is in reference to who might be responsible for Wendy's disappearance. Of course, no one might be responsible. Maybe she took off on her own. Now, here's the most important quote, though. Those are all very interesting quotes, but here is the main one that we need to talk about. Someone needed a lift, an acquaintance. Remember, going back to the reason she left at 6:30, someone needed a ride. That is Scott's understanding. I'm guessing he has found this out from an employee there. Maybe Wendy said something to this other employee. I'm going to take this person. And the way Scott describes it, someone needed a lift, an acquaintance. Notice he does not say friend. Notice he does not say woman. He does not say man, an acquaintance. I will tell you, when people say the word acquaintance, it's usually not in a flattering manner. When I think of acquaintance, I think of a person I am usually around, but I don't know if I'm particularly thrilled with that person. Not a friend. I think what I'm saying here is, if Wendy was giving a ride to a friend, that's what Scott would have said. Oh yeah, she gave a friend of hers a ride. But he didn't. He said an acquaintance. Very vague. An acquaintance is a very vague term, and it's kind of a demeaning term. Whereas a friend is a very specific term, and it's a very good term. Keep that in mind. That's why these quotes are so important. Most importantly, men do not refer to women as acquaintances. So I'm inclined to believe that when he said someone needed a lift, an acquaintance, he meant a guy. That Wendy was giving a ride to a guy. And also the reason he used the word acquaintance is this is a guy that maybe Scott isn't too excited about, that Wendy and this person are together. Frankly, an acquaintance is not a very good term. It then could lead us to believe maybe an acquaintance that took her, or they went together to this motel, because I have to tell you that if Wendy did have some issues, I think that is how Scott or anybody would refer to a friend who's getting together with somebody they shouldn't be. Yeah, John Doe has this acquaintance. Jane Smith has this acquaintance. It's just how we use the English language. So, what's missing, though, from all these articles as far as quotes? No quote from Scott about being concerned. Nothing in there. All of you will think that means that he probably killed her. However, I have a totally different idea about this. Being that the next day he didn't seem concerned, the Sunday didn't call the police or anything else. My guess, unless of course he did have something to do with their disappearance, but I don't think there are any facts to support that. My guess is that maybe Wendy has done this before, that she's gone off the grid for a couple days and eventually come back. I think this would then lend a lot of credence to the sighting at this Motel 6. It'll be up to you to decide which path of logic makes most sense to you, but it's just something to think about. Now, quotes are very important when it comes to complex disappearances. Why? Because with complex disappearances, reporters usually get facts wrong. Why? Because they're not used to reporting on disappearances. And some of the ones that we've covered on Unfound that are very, very complex were quotes from that time, from friends, from the police, from, employees at a bar or something. Tom Brown. Quotes are always going to be important in that disappearance. Brian Schaefer, a disappearance. I'm sure all of you know about the disappearance of Brian Schaefer from Columbus, Ohio. Quotes going back to the time. What did the people who were around him that night say? The two girls that were seen with him on the video. The friend and the female friend, guy friend and female friend who went with Brian to the Ugly Tuna that night. What were their quotes at the time? What have they said since then? And then also another one is Joshua Guimond, because just within the last few months, in my spare time, I've gone back and looked at articles about Josh's disappearance in Minnesota, and you can find quotes from his friends at the time who last saw him on that college campus. Very interesting. And sometimes when you read them, you can maybe start thinking about different scenarios. In contrast to when reporters just generally write up a disappearance, there always should be a question mark in your mind as to whether they're getting the facts right or not. So what do I think? Just going by the public info, and I don't know any more than all of you do, I think there are a lot of possibilities with Wendy's disappearance. I think if you are inclined to believe that the sightings at the motel are true, then did she overdose and other people cover it up? Did she go there? Was she forced to take somebody there? It's possible. On the other hand, if you don't believe that, then who exactly did she leave this pizzeria with? That's not a name that anybody's posted anywhere. Does anybody even know that? Could these two have been having an affair? Scott wasn't around. She knew he's going to the Moose Club, and she's going to have a get-together with this guy. Certainly possible. Or she really did just drop that person off somewhere, and did something go on? I go back to the car being so close to that river. Then we have to think about that. A lot of different possibilities. Of course, we know that her phone was dumped far away from her car, but I'm not sure what to think about. If somebody was riding around contemplating, if she was riding around contemplating her life, then maybe it's not crazy that she chucked her phone, especially if people were trying to call her. This is common for people who end up harming themselves. Not saying that I believe that, but it's something for you to consider. It's certainly a thing when it comes to disappearances. So I think the possibilities are still very wide open with Wendy's. I, of course, hope that she is still alive. I hope she is found in fine condition. We're going on 4 months. We know that's not a good sign, but that's what I'm hoping for. But I don't want you to latch on to any one particular possibility really, really hard, because I think that a lot of different choices are still possible at this time. So I thank you for watching this video on the disappearance of Wendy Gessing, this episode of Unfound. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please hit that little bell button so you get alerted when we upload videos such as this one. And I'll be talking to you again next month for another edition of Unfound Now. See ya.